What do you do when you live next to a wash in the Arizona desert and your water line is hanging out in the middle of everything and it's almost monsoon season? Hi, I'm Brian.
Okay guys, there's our first two tanks positioned. There's my gravel base. There's our carport. That's the low end, so that's where a gutter will come off. Ultimately, let's see, so we've got two tanks here. This will be the outlet. I'm gonna build my little pump house basically right here. So out of here, I'm gonna go into a pump, and then there'll be a pressure tank in there as well, and a set of filters. And today I'll come out of there and go over to the RV, but in the future I'll come out of there and go over to our house. So this is the next step to actually get usable water out of these. There's no water in these right now, but I can fill them up with our well water when I want. But to get the water usable, I need that little pump house to send it over to the RV. Here's our connection. The two tanks are connected right now. So they've got a ball valve so that I can isolate between the two tanks. I can shut the water off so that it doesn't flow between. There's a union so that I can actually take it apart if I need to mess with anything. And this is a flexible hose, so if there's any settling or anything between these two, there's a little bit of movement. If that was just PVC, that could actually maybe, if things moved a little bit, that could crack or something. So that's a flexible connection. And at the back end of this second one, we have another ball valve to prepare for an eventual third. There will be an eventual third tank here. And the idea is going to be, so here's where the water will go in. So that third tank will put its lid facing this direction so that these two will connect up. And we'll have a lid here for this third one and a lid here. So what we'll probably do is have one of the gutters come into one of those lids and the gutter from the house come into the other one of those lids. So we'll basically feed these two tanks from these two roofs, and then as these tanks fill up, actually all three tanks with these ball valves open will all fill up at the same time, but we'll actually be feeding water into two separate tanks. But it all will evenly distribute with the ball valves open. And we can actually tie in from the shed roof. We should be able to do a wet delivery. So this will be a dry delivery system. So the water, it flows through that system from one spot to another and flows completely out, right? So there's nothing left behind, so that's dry. But we'll probably do a wet delivery system from the shed up here because it's got enough of a rise. We'll probably, when we come off of that shed roof with our gutter, we'll probably send that right underground in PVC. We'll bring it down here underground and have it kind of come up and into one of the tanks. And we can do that because there will be enough of a height difference that water will push, just like a water level would do. It'll push the water in. Now that is a dry system because when the water flows, there will still be water sitting in that pipe. Did I say that's wet? That's a wet delivery system because there will be water sitting in that pipe after the rain has happened and the water has transferred into the tank. There will still be water sitting in that pipe between the two of these. So that's a wet system. So we're actually gonna have a little bit of both. But there it is, we have to get a gutter from this to one of these two tanks. So I suppose for starters, we'll come to this tank, and then maybe the house will come to that third tank that's gonna sit right here. I think we've got enough room for the third tank here. Hey guys, I'm just waiting for Rick from Oasis Water Harvesting to get here today. But before he gets here, I thought I'd give you kind of a preview of what I think we're doing today. He delivered these tanks a couple of weeks ago, but he was missing a few parts that are required here, so he's coming back today to take care of that. What we're doing here is, so here's a lid, and there's a lid of the second tank, here's a lid of this tank. The actual I mean, I guess there's a couple different ways to do it, but the way we're going to do it is the gutter that comes off of that end of the carport will make its way over to these tanks, probably this one, and we'll go into that lid. The way that works is you get a pipe to go into this little opening right here. So that's where the downspout will actually make its way into this little opening. So right now it's closed up. Rick's not dealing with that today, of course. I'll do that in the future. But what he is doing is this lid opens up here, and to prevent bugs and things from getting in, there's what's called a basket strainer that fits in this opening. So he's going to bring 2 of those for these tanks. It's basically just a big, screen like you would put in your shower drain to catch hair or something, right? So he's bringing a couple of those. They're made to fit this. But for now, this is screwed on to close. Again, downspout goes in there. The other thing Rick will be doing today is, if you know anything about water harvesting in general, one of the important principles is to plan for overflow. So he will be drilling into these 2 tanks to create an overflow spout, I guess you'd call it maybe. But basically he puts a 3-inch, he goes into one of these it's got 3 different spots to do it. 1, 2, 3, because this spot is taken by the lid, and a connection point here that we're actually not going to use because that's only a 2-inch. I believe what he's going to do with the overflow is make a 3-inch hole and give us a connection here basically for 3-inch PVC to come out of here and go wherever we want it to overflow to. I actually don't know yet where I'm going to have it overflow to. So the question he may ask me is where I want these holes drilled, either on this side or I suppose this other side of the tank. To me, I don't think it necessarily matters. I could do it over here too, right? So obviously the carport's here, so the overflow could come out here, go down underground, and wherever I wanted it to go. I assume it'll go north as my property slopes down, so I assume it'll head down this way somewhere. I don't know where I want to send it exactly yet, but that's what he's coming to do. So let's see what he does.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rick with Oasis Water Harvesting. We're installing an overflow system in this tank today. I really like using these rainwater harvest overflows. These come out of Australia, and they are, so out of Australia, they are metric, but they have adapters to adapt to US pipe thread, which we'll talk about here in a second. So the first thing you want to do is use this, I believe this is a 3 3/4 inch. Yeah, 3 3/4 inch hole saw. You don't want to do it too close to the top, because what's going to happen is this elbow here is going to go inside the tank. If you do it too close to the top, this elbow is going to be right up underneath the lid of this top. You don't want it down too low either, because the higher the overflow is, the more water storage. What this, well, here, let me drill this hole first.
Right.
The one thing you don't want are these little hairs that stick out, so you got to kind of pick them away, because that could cause a drip when you put your gasket, goes up against the side of the tank. So most tanks, when the water gets to this level, they overflow. Using this device here, the water has to get this high before it overflows. So you gain about 3 inches of water storage in the top of the tank.
Okay.
So you align this gasket so the holes on the back of the gasket are lined up with the flange here in the front. And I put the screw in just enough to where I started to see this bulge.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as we talked earlier, these are made in Australia, so this is a metric pipe size right here. So you get this adapter here. Let me pull this out real second. And it's a really nice snug fit. I don't glue these. I don't think the glue is necessary. And if ever you need to change something around, you don't have to, you can take it apart. This white insert is for a thin wall Schedule 3-inch pipe. If you take the white out, you can use, this gray part is for 3-inch Schedule 40 piping.
Okay.
Okay, so then I just get this short piece of Schedule 20 thin wall pipe. Now this overflow comes with this basket strainer. Like the Bushman tanks had the same kind of basket strainer in their tanks. The problem is
Overflow strainer, correct?
I'm sorry, overflow strainer.
We talked about that.
There I go again. If anything gets through your primary 16-inch basket strainer, or if water forms a scum on the surface, it won't take long to clog up this 3-inch little strainer here. And then if that gets clogged up, you don't have an overflow
So
anymore.
that thing's flat, and it doesn't open. It doesn't give at all. So whatever goes in there is going to get stuck in there. So I could see that clogging up for sure.
And this is an improvement over the Bushman tanks, which were a lot harder to get out to clean. This just slides out to clean it.
Okay.
But I've got another solution that's much nicer.
All right.
What I like using are these things. They're called a Mozzie stop. Mozzie is Australian for mosquito. And so when the tank overflows, the water pushes against this and opens it. And then when it stops overflowing, gravity just closes it. See, it's still got a screen here which will let the tank breathe a little bit, but this will never clog up. So in essence, what it is, it's a maintenance-free overflow. You never have to worry about checking your overflow screen to see if it's clogged up.
Oh, it just hit me. So the purpose of the screen, I always think of a screen as filtering, right? So the purpose of the screen isn't to prevent anything from getting out of the tank. You know, it's to prevent mosquitoes from getting in.
Exactly.
So that screen really does, when the water's coming out, that screen doesn't need to be there really. So that's why you allow it to flap open.
Right.
And that's fine. But then when it falls back shut, that stops anything from getting in.
Yeah.
That should have been obvious, but I didn't think about that.
So-
There are so many different examples on the internet of how to use these things. I actually didn't know before you came. I didn't know that the standard or main inlet was in the top of the lid. I didn't. I actually thought you were supposed to go in on these bulkheads. I didn't know actually. So
Also saying something else, I would recommend painting these because the plastic is not UV tolerant.
good point, especially
So
here in Arizona.
Get some spray paint,
Will
some
do.
tan colored spray paint, paint them. But still try and keep this screen open. You know,
Sure.
when water's coming out of the tank, you want air to be able to go in the tank to replace the water that's being taken out.
Right.
So you want these tanks to breathe. So having the screen like
Or else
this
it could
is not a
it could
bad
kind of
thing.
just suction.
Yeah, right.
So that's one down. So what we already talked about is in the future for me, you know, I'm gonna actually remove this end piece and put
yeah.
it somewhere. Yeah. So I'm either gonna pipe down to either some sort of collection right beside the tank if I want to collect a little bit extra, or I'm gonna pipe a tube all the way off to some runoff spot that I
let's
want,
talk
and
about
I might
that
move
because-
this all the way to the end.
Yes. So if you want to, I think the tanks look nicer without another pipe going down the outside of the tank.
Yeah.
Your overflow tank. So my installs, I just install this and I tell the customer the water's going to hit the ground right there. Put some large rocks there so it doesn't eat a hole in the dirt.
Oh,
You
just
know,
make a drain down there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But your pea gravel here it'll probably make a hole in the pea gravel, but you know it's going to help defray the force of that water hitting the ground. But if you do this, put some bricks or some rocks or something.
I got
to
you.
diffuse the force.
Just let it fall though.
So it doesn't dig a hole in your dirt. If you want to pipe it out though, just get a longer piece of pipe here that would come out, and then far enough where an elbow can be placed here. Go down to the bottom, and then place another elbow going out. Take your pipe out to wherever you want to take it to, and then put this on the end of the pipe at that end.
Yeah.
So snakes, lizards, mice,
Yeah.
whatever critters can't crawl up the overflow and fall into your tank.
Yeah.
That will make your tank have a aroma you don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
You know. So keeping critters from falling inside the tanks.
So today that thing's going to be right on the end here, but in the future I will be moving that somewhere else,
Yeah.
depending on how we approach it.
And like I said, it's a nice tight fit. I don't worry about gluing them together. They're
That's nice.
okay.
So we're also going to put one of these on this tank over here. So what we talked about was you really only need this overflow if there's water going in from a downspout.
Right.
If I end up with 3 tanks, which I believe I might, I have 2 today, but if I end up with a 3rd tank and I really only pipe my gutters into the first 2, this overflow probably will not actually do anything.
Right.
But I wanted to have it there in case I stop at 2 tanks. There's a chance I might.
Yeah, if you have a tank that water's not going into during a rain event, the water's not going to go from this tank through the 2-inch compressor
Right.
fitting into the bottom and build the pressure
And
back
still
up
overflow.
and then overflow out
Yeah.
this. It's going to want to go out the tank where the water's going in
Sure.
as quick as possible.
Right.
Water always seeks the least past the resistance.
Yep.
That's another one of those rules.
Yep.
So it's not going to want to go through that 2-inch pipe up, fill this tank, and come out this overflow.
Yeah.
It's going to want to go out the overflow where the tank is water's going in that tank.
So if I end up at 3 tanks, this may be kind of a non-issue, but we're putting this here today just in case I stop at 2 tanks. This will potentially overflow if I do 2 tanks, if I only end up with 2
It's
tanks.
like you run your house water into this.
Right, so.
You got to run the carport water in this tank because of the location.
Yep. Okay,
Okay.
so that's that. We'll do one more of those, and I think you have basket strainers as well? Is that true?
Let's go talk about the basket strainer.
All right.
Ready?
Yep.
So this is your 16-inch basket strainer on any standard tank. Now when you put these basket strainers in, you don't want to put them in like this
Sure.
because they'll fall through.
Bye-bye basket
They're
strainer.
it's a pretty there's a little lip around the top of this ring here, and this can compress
Oh,
a
it
little
is?
bit to
Okay.
fall in.
All right.
So when you put your basket strainer in, go in good and flat, get in on that lip, and then drop it into place, and it's good and solid.
All right. And this, as water comes in, I mean, you'll be getting a little pressure on this thing, so it wouldn't take much to knock it. Yeah. All right.
It's not going to fall through.
All right.
Now these lids this is your vent lid. This is actually a vented cap. Actually, air can go up through here and come out these holes here.
Okay.
So, but critters can't, like mosquitoes can't get through here. It's just meant for air to go through, but you won't use that. So when you screw this on, you're gonna back, and then it's ready to, it's locked in place. And that's what your downspout goes into. Now, in terms of checking these basket strainers, obviously leaves will clog this up if you get enough leaves in here. But I've even seen these things clog up over, a year or two if you don't ever check it, just dust will eventually clog all these pores. If you check it 2-3 times a year, you're probably good.
Yeah. Okay.
I would get up there every month and check it. But I really like these basket strainers that have the metal screen material.
Okay.
And once again, this is a 20 by 20 mesh
Okay.
screen. So there's very small openings. The downside of that is dust will eventually clog them up even if you don't keep an eye on it. And clean it out.
Sure. Which we get a ton. That'll be more, more than leaves and stuff. I think dust will be what I get the most of.
There are some tanks on the market that are not light-proof.
That's what I was just going to
polyethylene
mention the
tanks.
first time I talked to you in
don't
person.
need paint on this because
Yeah.
this is an opaque tank.
Yeah.
But there are other tanks on the market. In fact, almost every other tank on the market. I think possibly the Rotoplast tanks, I've heard that they are light-proof because they put a white liner on the inside of the tank. So that is a good light-proof tank. But every other tank on the market, if the tank's not black, you're going to get sunlight coming through. So
Yeah.
you can paint those tanks to make them light-proof. And the best paint we have found is a rubberized roofing paint. And we have found that will stick to polyethylene tanks.
Yeah, before I visited you in person, a friend of mine, and wisely so at the time, he was reminding me over and over. He said, "You're going to have to paint these tanks, or be careful what color you get and everything." And then, so when I met you in person at your yard where you keep these, I said, "Hey, does this actually not let light in?" And we actually looked inside, and
There's no light.
so what we were talking about the light is, like I said, I can just hold it in there.
If I put this lid over the hole, so there's no sunlight coming in from the top.
And on another tank, and you even had some at your yard still.
I showed you,
believe.
yeah.
It's pretty obvious that they're just thinner.
So here's
Is it the thickness or is it what's on it?
So
I guess?
here's the story about polyethylene, what it is.
Yeah.
When other companies make a colored tank, they use a white translucent resin and you've seen white polyethylene tanks around, like those box tanks.
Sure.
Okay?
IBC totes. Yeah.
That's just the pure resin without any colorant in it. So when Bushman or Polymart makes a colored tank, they throw a little powdered dye in with the powdered resin at the time they make the tank. So the tank is colored throughout the thickness of the wall of the tank, but it's not a dense coloration. So Enduraplast uses what's called a compounded resin, and so do other manufacturers when they make their black tanks.
Okay.
A compounded resin means the resin, when they get it in the little pellets, is already pre-colored.
Okay.
And so the black tanks that other companies use, which use for well water storage for water use in your home, they don't want algae in those tanks. And Duraplast uses compounded resin on all their colors.
Okay.
And that compounded resin, that's why the sunlight doesn't get through, because the coloration is more dense. These walls are a little thicker, though, than other tanks I've been familiar with, but it's really the compounded resin is what really makes that sunlight from coming through the tank.
Okay. That was another misconception on my part. I thought it was, again, from information I get on the internet and things, I actually thought that with these tanks, I thought it was just common to have to literally get inside here and clean this thing out periodically. No. So that's what I thought you did.
I cleaned my system out after 10 years. Yeah. I have my primary 3,000-gallon tank is collecting water off of a 2,500 square foot shop roof. Okay. And after 10 years, I finally thought, I probably should clean out the bottom. So I took the fitting out of the bottom. I drained as much water as I could. I tilted the tank as much as I could with a shovel and some 4x4s, tilting it so I could get that water to run out that fitting. And then I got up here with a hose and I hosed it out. But, after 10 years, I had half an inch of mud in the bottom of the tank. Okay. It wasn't that big a deal. And, I will say this, going to the ARCSA conferences, I've been to a dozen of the national rainwater harvesting conferences that ARCSA puts on, and I've heard a couple presenters bring up the fact that mud in the bottom of your tank is not really a bad thing. It hosts microorganisms in that mud, and they swim up in the water column and they eat things like viruses and bacteria. Okay. So actually having your own little microorganisms system in the bottom of the tank with that mud, it's not a bad thing. I wouldn't worry about the mud in the bottom of your tank.
All right.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching.
If you liked what you saw, please hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing or sharing with a friend. And click the bell notification so you never miss any of our videos.
We really appreciate every view and comment. And if you're looking for other ways to support us, please check out the links in the description box.
See you in the next video.